mindset coaching is actually pretty vague. When so many people are like, I need a better mindset, or you hear advice scrolling through Instagram, I'm sure I could find 5 posts in the next 2 seconds that are like, you just need a better mindset. But what does that actually mean?
Let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's going on, FYX listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krista Huber, and I'm back with another solo for this week as we're moving through the month of May. I've got a fun little list for you guys today because who doesn't love a good list, right? And as I talked about on last week's episode, right around this time last year, I had like 5 episodes in a row walking through all the lessons about different things I learned into my 20s related to life, relationships, friendships, my health, nutrition, all of it. And we did a 5-part series with a bunch of different lists, and I kind of got away from that format. So as I was thinking about this week's episode and this week's conversation, and really the last 2, building on the lessons taken away from 200 podcast episodes, and then this past week, just really focusing around this idea of like why we keep finding ourselves in this circular feedback loop of like, I'm busy, but I know what I need to do. And therefore I then need to tell myself that I need to take a break. And it's like, you can't win, right? So the whole concept around deciding if you need a break versus taking a modification can be related to a lot of different mindset theories, as I shared in last week's episode. But the one mindset thing and theme, I should say, that's kept coming up for me in having conversations with clients this past week is like, mindset coaching is actually pretty vague. When so many people are like, I need a better mindset, or you hear advice scrolling through Instagram, I'm sure I could find 5 posts in the next 2 seconds that are like, you just need a better mindset. But what does that actually mean? And I had a client come to me just 2 weeks ago and saying, she's had a lot going on in her life. She's feeling a little bit burnt out. And just feeling honestly kind of feeling stuck in work, feeling stuck in her fat loss routine. And it's just making her have that kind of headspace that's like a little bit blah. And in having this conversation, of course, she wanted to come to the table, presenting solutions that she had thought about, where she feels like she's specifically stuck. Sharing those actual details with our coaching staff was extremely helpful. But she made me take a step back and just kind of process for a second, because she said to me, I asked her the question of like, how can we support you the best in helping you get unstuck? Now, I know all the different tools and tips and tricks and things that we can throw at her, but I always find it really important to ask clients this question: how can I support you? And if you're a coach out there and you're listening to this and you don't even remember the last time you asked a client that question, I would challenge you to go back to your clients in the next 24 hours. And in particular, if there are clients that you haven't necessarily heard from as consistently, or you're identifying that maybe they're not as engaged in your program as they previously were, whether you're a fellow fitness coach or any sort of coaching, anything related to accountability, ask them, how can I support you? This is important because it allows you to understand what this individual, this client, thinks he or she needs to be able to get to where they want to go. And this client said to me, I think I just need some mindset work. And as soon as she said that, like I said, I took a little bit of a pause. And the reason why I took a pause was because I was like, yeah, I've been guilty of saying that, but I am so solution oriented and really tangibly focused on the tangibles to be able to help somebody have action steps that they can actually take on a regular basis to start to shift their mindset. Because let's be real, when has it ever worked for you to just wake up and be like, I'm going to have a good day today? That is a factor. Deciding to have a good day and deciding to make choices is so key to how you feel about yourself, your perspective, the way you see the world, the way you see relationships operating around you, your relation to everything happening around you. But I just don't think that's very helpful to be like, oh, I just need to change my mindset. Okay, but how? So I thought about that and I started throwing some different ideas at her. And one of the ones that we landed on will actually be first on this list. And so I said to myself, More people have probably had this thought like me, or maybe you've had this thought, but you haven't been able to express it. Maybe you've said to yourself, like, yeah, I can respect the concept of needing to shift my mindset, but here I am a year later or 6 months after telling myself that I needed to do that, or even 2 weeks after I declared that I need to change my mindset, telling myself that I need to change my mindset, but then not actually doing it. And if there's one thing about the Fitness Fix, we are right at that intersection of helping you bring the practicality to this entire fat loss process, because it's just never going to work when you think about your fitness and nutrition in a vacuum from the rest of your life. And when we think about these things and think about creating flexibility in a plan that actually fits into your day-to-day routine, when we know that the goal of losing body fat has to do with the identity shift of you stepping into this person who's already lost the weight, of operating like the future version of you who's already gotten there. That's all well and good, but it's not as effective if we don't lay out the exact steps you can take to get there. It's why we're so focused on habits. It's why we love tracking food, because it allows you to step into that mode of self-awareness. Self-awareness then influences your mindset. So in this quick episode, I just want to bring that all together. And I came up with about 5 different mindset tools that you can put into practice, ones that we use with our clients on a regular basis. And I gave them some cute names. So we're going to make this fun and we're going to dive right into them. So with that said, here's the list. First up, the daily peak and the pit. There's a lot of names for this, but I like the peak and the pit. And this is actually exactly what we implemented with this client who came to me saying, I really need some mindset support. And this is just something like, it's exactly what it sounds like. You get to the end of your day and you think about something that went well, the peak, and something that didn't go so great, the pit. And what's important about this exercise and using this tool is you can get really granular when you do this on a daily basis. Now, with all of these tools, I would really encourage you to, put the pen to paper or your thumbs to the screen and actually type these in your phone, because there is a ton of research around the fact with writing in particular and actually like moving your hand and having that connection between your pen and the paper that actually helps neurologically rewire your brain to shift your beliefs. That's why journaling is such a powerful exercise. But again, we tell somebody to go journal. I want you to look at this episode as a resource of like, okay, well, what can I actually journal about? And an exercise like the peak and the pit can be one of those things. So when you think about what to write down and why it's cool to do this on a daily basis is because this same exact client, I'll share one of the examples that she provided Coach Alyssa and I as soon as we asked her to do this. And in the setting of working with the coach, we made it super simple for her to track her peak and pit by literally saying to her, hey, every single day, if you feel overwhelmed by anything else as a part of the check-in process for the Fitness Fix, what we want to make super clear is that we are here to support you. And the benefit of having direct message conversations with us is that maybe you're not going into our coaching app and filling out all of the other details that we do ask clients to track, like your digestion, like your sleep, like your hunger cues, but you just keep us in the loop on what's going on in your life. And that can be a quick 2-minute message of here's what happened in my day today. And to tell us specifically what happened, here is what went well, the peak, and here's what didn't go so great. So this client has shared a couple of peaks, like the fact that she went for multiple walks after the week prior, really not moving her body between jumping from the 2 jobs that she has and just commuting a lot, just feeling like she wasn't in a good rhythm of keeping the structure of just getting outside for a daily 15-minute walk. Another peak that she shared was making the time to meal prep. And in particular, because she's sharing these peaks on a daily basis, by day 2 of sharing a peak, not only did she just say, hey, I made time to meal prep, she was able to get more detailed on the fact that she focused on meal prepping her lunches, because the pattern that she's recognized for herself when she seemingly falls off track, when she feels stuck in the state of blech or burnout or whatever you want to call it, is that she has a tendency to do pretty well with her breakfast and dinner, but feels like she wouldn't grade her, ability to be successful with her food tracking or sticking to the protocols that we set up for her above a B or a C. And really, she wants to reach for that A because she tends to kind of let things like fall apart during lunchtime. Makes perfect sense. Anybody who's super busy out there, who has a lot of meetings stacked back to back, I can speak from so much personal experience on this. I'll start off my day really strong because I've got my solid morning routine in place. And then I get sucked into my computer and I start playing a game with myself where I'm like, I just got to get this done and this done and this done. And all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock. Haven't really eaten. You're hungry. And then what happens? Your hunger becomes an emergency. So you start making decisions that you know are not necessarily aligned with that future self we talked about, that person who's already lost the weight. So really being able to see her process this and recognize, like, okay, if you're watching the video, the microphone almost took a tumble. Seeing her be able to kind of like recognize this thought process and note that it's not just about the meal prep, but note that it's actually about meal prepping for these specific points in her day, is just allowing her to now get more clarity and more focus around what actually moves the needle for her. And in a way, that's a beautiful thing because it gets her out of the state of overwhelm. It gets her out of the state of stuckness because now she's like drilled into exactly what is blocking her from having more of that compliance with her routine, from getting her from the proverbial, BC range on her ability to hit her macros to an A. And then it helps her block out all the other noise, right? She's not putting this pressure on herself to be like, well, I need to do this. I need to fix this. I need to fix that. I need to get to the gym. I need to make sure all of these meals are ready to go in the exact containers as I need them. I need to make sure I make time to, all the other tangential stuff. Maybe it's not even food or fitness related. It's cleaning your apartment. It's taking care of other responsibilities at work. It's taking care of your family, all of that piling up on you. Now the pits, I won't use her exact examples just to keep them personal to her. But for the most part, the pits, she's actually realized when she puts them up against the peaks, it helps her see that the pits relatively are not, quote unquote, that bad. And that's what our mind does that is so tricky, because our minds have this ability to make us think that certain things are like really catastrophic when they're actually not that big of a deal. So I love the idea of really kind of like merging these 2 points together to ourselves. Okay, if we compare the peak and the pit and we write them down side by side right next to each other, we're putting ourselves in a position where we can then see my brain is making me think that XYZ is going wrong, or I'm stacking a lot of losses throughout my day. But the reality is I just have that perception because I've been looking for the bad. So what's the mindset shift? Boom, you start looking for the good because you keep focusing on practicing writing down these peaks. So try that one out. A lot of these things are going to have some sort of crossover where like the benefit of the tool is very similar. And the reason why I'm sharing 5 is because I want you to latch on to whatever 1 or 2 of these exercises. Literally, you could just pick one of these and start to practice it on a daily basis, because we're not trying to make you do 5 new things, to help you start to see the shift in your own mindset. So whatever speaks to you. Second one, I like to call this one the brain dump, or let's call it the thought download. Either one of those. I typically refer to it as the brain dump, but I do like this other name, the thought download. And this is just basically like taking all of the mental chatter that's in your head. If you didn't know this, we have like 80,000 thoughts a day. It's something insane that's happening as we're working, as we're walking outside, as we're walking our dog. Like you're just literally, your consciousness is just going. It's like a motor that's nonstop. So it can be really helpful to just set aside 5-10 minutes. You can literally put a timer on your phone and just dump out everything that's happening in your brain. Hence why I like to call it the brain dump, or literally paying attention to the thoughts you're having. You're downloading them by writing them down, putting them in a journal, typing them in your notes app on your phone. But you're doing it, this part is really important, from a place that lacks judgment. It's simply observation. Now, this gives you the chance to then look at what you've written and gives you the space to actually reflect on it. And this kind of goes hand in hand with this whole like contrast between the peak and the pit, and you realizing like, oh, the peaks really do outweigh the pits when I actually look for them. And let's say, for example, one of the thoughts you had was like, I always struggle with my weight, or I just don't have time for this, or everyone else has an easier time with fat loss than I do. Everyone else seems to have more ease with fitting these things into your routine. And this is where you get to shift the mindset. This is where you get to actually rewire your brain, because You're going to analyze these and you're going to ask yourself a couple questions. You can ask yourself any of these, but these are the three that I like to go with. Let's take the example of everybody else finds this whole fat loss thing easier than me. Here's what you're going to ask yourself once you read that statement. Is this actually true? Like, genuinely, is it literally true? Is this thought helping or hurting me? And this is the key thought, because this is where we're going to shift your mindset and change your belief. What would I rather think instead? Ask yourself those questions. If you only ask yourself one, it's the last one. What would I rather think instead? This can take a shift. Like, let me give you an example. Maybe you've been telling yourself, oh, like I have a hard time in the gym because I'm just not an athlete. I didn't grow up working out that way. So now this is really difficult for me. I would love to set a goal for myself of running some sort of 5K, 10K, maybe even a marathon. Never be me. I just don't love running, but I'm certainly not the person who's saying I'm not an athlete. But if you have this narrative in your head where you're telling yourself, I'm not an athlete, what if you just switched it to the fact that, like, wait, if I tell myself that I'm not an athlete, I'm genuinely setting myself up to be uncomfortable in the gym. So what would it take for you to realize that that thought is not helpful? And instead, I don't care if you don't go so far as to call yourself an athlete, but what if you just tell yourself mantras repeatedly? I am strong. I belong in the gym. I am committed to my health. And whereby you know that going to the gym makes you somebody who's committed to your health, whether you see yourself as an athlete or not. My goal for you is to get you to a place where you see yourself as an athlete just because you go to the gym. And it's not a just, like, that's a big action step, but you don't need to have a history of playing sports to feel qualified to go to the gym. So rather than put yourself in a position that may already feel uncomfortable, because a lot of women don't love stepping into the weight room, and I get that. But if you're telling yourself, oh, I'm not an athlete, how are you setting yourself up for that to be an even easier? It's just going to get harder, right? We want to look for ways to make it easier. And as a coach, I could tell you, just go to the gym, just go to the gym, just go to the gym. But that's not, that directive from me is never going to outweigh the voice in your head, because it's that underlying belief system that's trying to tell you, oh, you don't belong here. So let's shift you into a state where you believe that you belong here. And that is going to be more effective and more powerful when you actually take the time to dump out those thoughts on a piece of paper and start to analyze what's helpful, what isn't, what's staying, and what goes. Tool number 3. This one definitely builds on number 2, because it helps you analyze, what things you're saying to yourself are worth saying to yourself and what things you may be saying to yourself are not. So I like to call this one the awareness tool that is the tracker. We all have that inner narrator, like I just described, right? And that inner narrator, like, let's just be honest, can be a real big old bitch sometimes. It's not nice to us. And you know what your mom taught you? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. And yet you are in your own head saying things to yourself that you don't like. Think about it. Not to bring up what might be a sore subject for some people, but when's the last time you went into a dressing room, tried something on? Let's go all the way there and say, try on a bathing suit. And you know that you're on a journey to working towards bettering yourself, seeing body composition changes, losing fat, everything. But the minute you put that bathing suit on, the first thought that pops into your head is something negative. We got to start keeping track of those. A little tally. So unlike tool number 2 with this brain dump or the thought download, this one, you're not actually going to write down the thought, because we did that in number 2. You're just going to tally, like put a little 1 in a note on your phone. How many times a day you have negative thoughts. And this is where the self-awareness actually builds, because the magic is going to start to happen when you realize that you get through a whole day and you've had like 50 instances of this. Some people like to do this by, like, I forget what research study this came from, but there's a study where people find that, like, reversing different habits, like thought, but habits that are not helpful for you. One being thought patterns like this. You could wear like a rubber band, and every time you have the thought, you like flick the rubber band, because the little bit of pain that comes from the rubber band is positive reinforce or negative reinforcement, but it's reinforcing you in a way to be like, hey, this thought is not helpful, so I'm going to associate it with something negative, aka the little, little bit of, like, it's not really pain, but the little pressure that you feel on your wrist when you actually flick yourself with the rubber band, the hair tie, whatever. You might find that if you do something like this, you've been calling yourself lazy. I think a lot of female clients, especially the ones who are busy with work, play, your social events, taking care of your household, being a rock star at your job, all of it, wanting to be a good partner. We are very hard on ourselves and insisting that if like we have a Saturday where we really just need to decompress, we call ourselves lazy. That's not helpful. How about that's time for you to be present and focus on genuinely doing nothing? Because guess what? There's tons of benefits to that. Like a lot of creativity can come from doing nothing, but it's shifting your perspective. And I could sit here and tell you, oh, being lazy isn't a bad thing. It's just how we need to reword it. But again, this is about reinforcing you believing that too, not me just telling you that because I'm the coach and the motivator, and therefore you should just simply listen to what I say. It's one thing for you to listen to what I have to say. It's another thing for you to develop, again, that identity, but intrinsically believe that those things are true as it applies to you. All right, number 4. This gets into the whole identity conversation that I just was touching on, and I spent a lot of time talking about a few episodes ago in identifying like your why and your connection, as well as in episode 200 when I talked about trusting the process and realizing that like the process itself is all about the identity shift. So we're going to call this mindset tool the identity bridge. And this is just about actually bridging the gap, no pun intended, between who you are now and who you want to become. So as I was touching on a few minutes ago and saying like there's a lot of crossover between these, one of the most important parts of actually stepping into the person who's already lost the weight is believing that you are that person, right? But what are you supposed to do? Just like sit there and be like, I lost weight, I lost weight, I lost weight. That feels a little bit silly. And if we actually genuinely want you to believe it, we need to put into practice some steps to get you from point A, where you're on the start of the path, and all the way over to point B, C, D, whatever, where you've actually officially lost that weight. So it's thinking about these little things that you can do, right? And let's say you want to have this identity of like, I want to be a person who's consistent. I want to be a person who is disciplined. Well, it's not going to work for you to sit there and just be like, I need to be more disciplined. So instead, how can we think about that? So let's say you say it's like consistent / disciplined. Think about one habit of a person who is disciplined. Ideally, it's a habit that you're not yet doing, but something you would like to do, and start really small. This is key. Let's say you know that like a really healthy person consistently drinks water, like has their 120 ounces. For those of you who aren't watching the video, I just held up my Stanley. Has their 120 ounces like clockwork without even having to think about it. If you want to become the person who actually consistently drinks that water, right? And it's not even about the water itself. It's you identifying as the person. It's bridging the gap between the person you are right now versus the person who is already identifying as disciplined and saying, hey, like this is a vote in the direction of me becoming a future version of myself that is more disciplined simply because I consistently hit 120 ounces of water a day. So what are you going to reverse engineer to get to that goal? You making a commitment to filling up your water bottle, right? So that could look like a habit stack where every night before you go to bed, after you brush your teeth, you fill up your water bottle and leave it on your counter in your kitchen, or better yet, you'll leave it right on your nightstand. So that the minute you wake up in the morning and your feet hit the floor, one of the first things you can do, just like we have the routine of going to the bathroom, brushing our teeth, taking a shower, whatever, you will start to drink sips of that water. And that's going to then create a domino effect where you see and believe that you are in fact this disciplined person because you are taking actions that identify with it. And I feel that the part that people really get tripped up on is they want to make these really big steps. And it's not about taking these really big action steps. There's nothing wrong. It's never too small for you to pick on something like the water bottle example. If you're overwhelmed and you feel like you just have a whole lot going on, why not stack the deck in your favor of finding the win? Make it something that is really, it seems like almost silly because you're like, well, I'm 30 something, 50 something, 27 years old, however old you are. I should be able to be doing that. I shouldn't have to tell myself that I need to put my water bottle next to my nightstand. Who cares? Remember, we're not judging ourselves, just like we talked about in that thought download exercise. It's just about starting to develop these smaller, tiny habits that will then grow you into the version of you who identifies as that extremely disciplined person. All right, we got one more. Now, this last one is something we do religiously inside of the Fitness Fix. Every single one of our clients does this roughly every other week, some weekly, just depending on where they are in our program and what part of our program they're following. And that is your weekly review and your weekly reset. Inside of the Fitness Fix, we call this a weekly check-in. So on Sundays, all of our clients get a form that they submit to us through our coaching app called EverFit, and we ask them to reflect on their week. So let's say you're doing this and maybe you're navigating this on your own and you don't necessarily have the accountability of a coach. I will share some of the exact questions that we ask on our weekly check-ins inside of the Fitness Fix, but I'm also going to give you some that you can just kind of throw out there for yourself. So inside of the Fix, these questions in particular look like, of course, asking you to review, how did your workouts go this week? How are your energy levels? Overall, how is your digestion? How are your hunger cues? How well do you feel that you hit your macros? Review your actual food log. Would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I barely tracked, 5 being I absolutely crushed it, I nailed it, I pre-planned all my meals? And then this is what I feel are like the 2 best questions. Give me 3 habits, behaviors, decisions, steps that you took this week that supported your success and therefore you plan to do them next week. Second one, give me 3 steps, decisions, choices, actions that you took that did not support your success and therefore hindered you. So hint, hint, we are going to adjust them for next week. Writing this down and putting this, in our case, right in our coaching app, or in your case, in a note on your phone, is going to make it glaringly obvious what's working for you and what fell short. That is literally the peak in the pit. It's just summed up over the course of a whole week, right? So it's really crucial that we take the space to do this when we are the person that's moving a million miles a minute. We've got a stacked work calendar during the week, but then we also play hard. So we got a whole lot going on the weekends. And I find that even for our clients, after a couple months inside of our program, it can become one of the things on the to-do list that we start to drop. So how do we adjust for that? We ask our clients to say, hey, maybe you're not necessarily filling out your check-in every single week, but you're shooting us over a note every Wednesday, sending us that direct DM, like my client did, who inspired this entire conversation around mindset, to just be like, I feel stuck with this and this is going well, so that we can keep that open feedback loop, that open piece of communication to help you continue to refine your mindset overall and incorporate some of these tools, one of these tools, 2 of these tools, but knowing that the underlying foundation for all of this, like the energy, I should say, that has to be behind all of this, is it's all from a place of curiosity, not judgment. When you are committed to bettering your mindset, that is the first block that we just have to remove. Because if you're sitting there being like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, but it's delivered with this tone, or you're analyzing it, being like, why did I not complete these things I said I was going to do? You will forever be stuck in that cycle of thinking you're not doing enough, of thinking things will be difficult, of thinking that you're not going to get there. All the things that we said with this self-awareness tracker that we wanted to be able to shift from and move away from. Now, that doesn't mean every single day is going to be perfect. This also is not in the name of any sort of toxic positivity, which is why it's so crucial to remember that these are tools, that they can ebb and flow, that they can be adjusted to fit into your life. And I just can't emphasize that adjustment piece enough, because I know that the reason why anybody out there who's listening to this has struggled with following through on goals, with feeling like weight loss is in fact pretty simple, is because you don't give yourself enough credit for all of the other things that you're managing in your life. And then you convince yourself that you need more rigidity, you need less flexibility to be able to get to where you want to go. But I say we need the most flexibility, and we need to pair that flexibility with you loving yourself, with you recognizing that taking care of yourself and your health is a representation of you respecting yourself. And operating from that energetic state is ultimately what will shift your mindset. So try these out. shoot me a DM at the Krista Huber over on Instagram, because I want to hear from you. If you practice any of them, send me a screenshot of the notes on your phone where you're going to start doing this. And again, start small. Maybe this is something you commit to doing once a week. And once you successfully do it once a week, then move to twice, then to 3 times. And as you start to see the benefit of it, with that identity shift, right? And just bridging the gap to becoming the person who simply operates this way, it will become automatic. It will become something that you actually look for in your routine, because you can recognize that the side effect is that it makes you feel really good, and that it's a part of the process of helping you hold this narrative that fat loss does get to be simple, that this truly is a lifestyle, and this is something that you can do no matter what's on your plate. And you deserve to feel like your best self as you juggle all the other things that you manage in your life. So with that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend ahead, and I will see you guys next week.